Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. Just going to wait for folks to join. So as people trickle in, we'll be getting started soon. For everyone just joining, we're going to get started soon. Just as people join, get started momentarily. For everyone just joining, we're gonna just let a few more people join and we'll be getting started in just a few moments. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to today's panel on women leading the labor movement surge. This is going to be a really great conversation. I'm really excited to get started. So for everyone who's watching, I encourage, if you're comfortable, to enter your name, city, and if you'd like your organization in the chat. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be sent out afterwards and is also being live streamed on Facebook. So by way of introducing myself, I'm Mary Grace Menner. I am a labor law fellow of Will Empower, Women Innovating Labor Leadership, where I work in the office of Congressman Andy Levin. And today's panel is hosted by the Century Foundation and Will Empower, a program of the Kamanovich Initiative at Georgetown University and the Center for Innovation in Worker Organization at Rutgers. So thank you so much to our hosts, Will Empower and the Century Foundation, with special thanks to the Century Foundation's president, Mark Zuckerman. So we'll start off by hearing from our awesome panelists and we'll take Q&A at the end. So please feel free to send questions throughout the panel and we'll take them at the end. You can send questions either in the Q&A function or in the chat. With that, I'm so excited to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Michelle Chen. Michelle is a contributing writer for The Nation and In These Times, a contributing editor at Dissent Magazine, and a co-producer of Asia Pacific Forum podcast and Dissent's Belabored podcast. She studied history at the City University of New York Graduate Center and, starting in the fall, will be a fellow in labor history at Cornell University. So with that, Michelle, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mary Grace, and thanks. Thank you to everyone in the audience for coming today. So it's been more than 2 years since the pandemic has upended our lives, and our jobs were some of the first places where we saw the status quo being dramatically upended. Some of our workplaces went remote, others shut down altogether, and still others intensified production and forced frontline workers to put their health at risk every day to keep supply chains, hospitals, supermarkets, daycares, etc., running. And the hardest hit workers in many cases, those who had the least flexibility or choice over their working conditions, were generally women, low-wage earners, and people of color. And while people braved a deadly virus to show up at work each day, many started to question whether work was really worth dying for. And some started thinking about how they would make their workplaces better. And one of the upshots of the turmoil that the pandemic has wrought on our work lives is that it has helped spur people to take action, to protect their rights at work, and to organize their fellow workers. In some cases, this has taken the form of fairly spontaneous or unofficial work stoppages, such as safety strikes organized by Amazon workers who challenged hazardous working conditions. In recent months, we have seen a rising tide of union drives, many of them clustered in industries that have historically been quite successful at keeping unions out, like food, retail, and logistics. And now, with the pandemic seemingly in a slow retreat amid a tight labor market, organizers are taking stock of what they've accomplished. It means unionized workers at Amazon, hundreds of union elections pending at Starbucks outlets across the country, and a fresh crop of labor organizers. And so today we are talking about women who are at the helm of this movement today and how their experience as women have shaped their perspective as workers and organizers. Our panelists today represent a sample of some of the most successful and innovative organizing campaigns out there today. Jennifer Bates is a worker organizer at Amazon's fulfillment center BMH1 in Bessemer, Alabama. Jennifer has been at the facility since May 2020, just after it opened, and is a leader of the Bamazon Union. It's an initiative in partnership with the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union, and she's a part of that organizing effort. Nazli Zmazadeh is a senior software engineer at the New York Times, working on editorial tools and, along with about 600 other worker colleagues, a member of the newly organized New York Times Tech Guild. And Maddie Van Hook is a shift supervisor at Starbucks in Cleveland, Ohio, and she is a Pisces, a proud member of the queer community, a cat mom, and an aggressively mediocre gamer. She also plays D&D, watches lots of NBC in her free time. And they are relatively new to Starbucks, Cleveland, and the union movement, but have been so lucky to find passion and community in all three. And without further ado, we will go into the questions. So first, I'd like to go around and have each of you tell us a bit more about the campaigns that you've been working on, and also, if possible, talk about what you hope to embark on in the near to medium term future as the next steps for your movement. So Jennifer, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you again for having me on today. And I'll be glad to talk about our organization and what we're doing right now. Right now, we're embarked in the middle of our second election and waiting on ballots and challenges for the outcome of the second go round. And right now, only thing we're doing is continuing to encourage the employees to continue to stand and continue to fight because it's a long fight. It got frustrated at times, but we're still in it. And we're not going to stop until there's a change.
Let me unmute myself. Nazli?
Sorry, I was very moved by what Jennifer said about how it's a long fight. So I work at the Times, where we it was the very beginning of March, it was March 3rd. We had our ballot count. Very short version of the story is that on the tech side of things, we've been unionizing for, we started having our earliest conversations towards the end of 2018, early 2019. So it took a very long time for us to talk to everyone in our unit, at about 600 people. You know, we were already into the Great Resignation during a lot of this. New people were joining, people like leaders in our organizing committee were leaving. But we signed cards and went public with the supermajority in April of 2021, and did not get a ballot count until March of 2022. So what Jennifer said about just it's such a long journey really resonated. We faced a lot of anti-union messaging. We actually went to a hearing with the National Labor Relations Board about the suitability of who should be allowed to be in our unit of tech workers. Really happily, both for us and as a precedent for tech unions in the future, they determined that everyone in our unit, in fact, do share a community of interest and are in fact part of the same union. And our NLRB mail-in election began a couple of months after that, and I'm thrilled to say that we won by a margin of 404 yes votes to 88 no votes, which felt just like an absolute mandate to build the strongest contract we possibly can. But right now, you know, having celebrated that win, we are kind of girding our loins for the next process of bargaining a contract. So we are forming our unit council, we are forming our bargaining committee, we're starting to talk to each other about what we want in a contract. So long road ahead, but really cool to look back and see how far we've come.
And Maddie.
Yeah, kind of similar to what Nazli was saying, not with the, you know, super long process, but we're just kind of waiting at this point. ballots started getting sent out yesterday, actually. So we'll have the next couple weeks to send those back. And this came after several months of kind of waiting to hear one way or the other. We also had a hearing with the NLRB. I think that's been pretty common with a lot of Starbucks that have filed as they try to push for that, just to, you know, push everything back and add another step to the process. But we filed in early January, and then our hearing was early February, and then it was kind of radio silence for a couple months. But then a couple weeks ago, we were, you know, told that our ballots were going to be sent out. So we're super excited. And yeah, we're just kind of in that same place of starting to form, you know, the bargaining committee. It's starting to get concrete sort of ideas of what we're gonna negotiate for when that time eventually comes. I don't know if anybody saw, but yesterday Howard Schultz actually sent out a memo, and managers were sending them to us, outlining a bunch of new like benefits and pay raises and such. And in the memo, he specifically said that unionized stores will not get them. You know, which isn't really surprising, but it does give us a very good starting point moving into negotiations. So really kind of a blessing in disguise there. So yeah, we have that, and we're just kind of waiting. May 24th will be our official ballot count, so we'll know by then one way or the other. I think at our store, we're all pretty confident that we have a very strong majority. We pretty much have since the beginning. It helps that there's only like 20 of us, so it was super easy to get through everyone. But yeah, we're just kind of hanging out till then.
Such a classic move to be like, well, we don't know if we're going to be allowed to offer these things to the union. And it's like,
Yep.
buddy, all you have to do is ask, and then they'll say yes, and then it'll
Yep.
be done. Anyway.
I promise you, we are not going to stop you from doing that.
My corporate hands are tied.
Mhm.
Thank you. So our first question, well, is both sort of hoping to get some general reflections from you. So the labor movement has seen a flurry of victories, both big and small, over the past several months. And to be honest, I think it has surprised even some folks in the labor movement, especially a lot because a lot of it has been happening in groups that have often been seen, perhaps erroneously, as hard to organize. So on the one hand, we have a lot of low-wage, precarious sectors in which a lot of women and people of color are employed. And on the other hand, we have the so-called white-collar sectors like tech, in which it may be difficult sometimes to inspire collective action or sort of grassroots working class consciousness. So I'd like to go around and have each of you talk about one thing you've learned about organizing from your experiences over the past several months. And did you discover anything, or were you surprised by anything that might cut against some of the assumptions and stereotypes that people might have about the labor movement and about your industry? So Nazli, would you like to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to say that organizing has taught me more, I guess, both taught me more about human nature than anything else that I've done, and also made me more friends than anything else that I've ever done. Just the act of getting to know someone and just doing even the most basic agitating about talking about your working conditions are just going to make you a lot more familiar with them than in some cases even years of just working together can. And I think that's by design. You know, a lot of what workplaces are meant to do is to kind of suppress the parts of us that like might have a lot in common. What surprised me most was just how surprising people are. There was, I had a colleague who, like earlier in his career, had worked in a trade union at a theater. And, the theater and entertainment industries are historically very unionized, and particularly in the kind of backstage area of things, like his union had like left a bad taste in his mouth. It was the kind he told the joke that was like, they say, how do you get a theater union member to change a light bulb? And the answer is you send like 5 people and 4 of them watch the 5th do the thing. Like, anyway, just and in talking to him, we, you know, got to an understanding that like we are making this new union. We're starting from zero in some ways. This can be what we want it to be. There were people whose, you know, you would never guess from other kind of like demographic information about them, but it turned out that their dad had been in a union, and they immediately understood the utility of this for even for different, you know, even for a white collar, even for a kind of like highly paid digital worker. And really, I think the important thing that we all kind of slowly came to is that like there's no white collar and there's no blue collar. Like we are all in the end precarious workers, and like having a union like gives us all so much more like power and leverage. And a direct example, actually, so at the New York Times, there's a long history, there's a decades long history of unions. The entire newsroom, with very few exceptions, is in a union, and our printing plant, which prints the paper every day, is in a union. There are like 2 days in the past like 100 years when the New York Times hasn't been printed, and one of them was because of a labor strike. To give you a sense of like how strong that union has been historically and how big it is. But the workers at our printing plant in College Point were able to use their union membership to like get a lot of protections in place, particularly in the very early days of COVID, when they were going in to print the paper every day, when we didn't know anything about what was going on with the virus yet. So I think particularly over the past 2 years, it's just become so clear that like there's nothing special about anyone's job. Everyone stands to benefit a lot from a union, and it's by kind of like getting to know each other and like learning more about what makes us like wildly different from each other, that I think has helped us all understand that like, oh, actually we have this one thing in common. It's that we're workers and we could stand to really improve our conditions by having a strong contract.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Oh, yes. Well, my experience was similar to hers and a little different because I realized shortly after the first vote that Alabama struggled with the education of unionization. And prior to going to Amazon, I worked at a pipe company for 10 years. It was unionized. And another facility that I worked at for 4 years was unionized as well. So when I went to Amazon, and shortly after being there, you know, most of us realized that we needed a union. And of course, some of my coworkers from the pipe company were also there as well. But me thinking, because, okay, we've been unionized, we thought that it would be easy, that a lot of people understood what a union was and the benefits of having a union. But soon after we finished the first election, we realized that, having conversations, that a lot of people really don't understand the union. And Amazon focused more on scare tactics and manipulation, and that further pushed them back into a corner of, I don't want to lose my job. I don't know what is a union for. And we're thinking that maybe your grandparents may have talked to you, and some have, and some parents and uncles and aunts did educate people. And one of the things I learned is everybody doesn't know about a union. And one thing I wish could happen, that they would begin to teach labor in middle school and not allow it to be a choice in college. And to go ahead and educate people, especially younger generation, because in Alabama, you can start working at 16. So the earlier you learn the benefits of having a union, the more better I think that you'll be able to unionize, knowing that you will gain benefits from it. We learned really quickly. So the second time around, we did more educating, and it felt good that we were able to sit down and educate people and give them some of the knowledge on the benefits of having a union. And also in the last job that I was in that was unionized, I worked with majority of men. So working at Amazon, I was surrounded by more women, and I had heart-to-heart conversations. I heard sad stories. They were emotional conversations that I had to let me know the struggle that women are really having on the job, you know, with their families, their children, having to work 2 and 3 jobs. And that really gave me the energy and the fire to continue to push. Women having issues, sickness, you're having to go to the restroom. And I think right now, this push right here all over the country is one that is necessary and is right on time for this surge in our era today.
Yeah. Yeah, both very great stories. I feel like we've been watching the Amazon struggle for a really long time, just trying to, support. And I know that like at Starbucks, we've tried to take inspiration from that as much as possible. I think to Michelle's original question, one of the things that surprised me, and this sounds kind of funny, but just that this surge has been from Starbucks so successful, because I don't know, Starbucks seems like kind of a weird place for a very big labor push. Like it's just a bunch of stereotypically, just a bunch of like kids, part-time workers. And if you don't know that much about the company, they sort of pride themselves on being pretty progressive as a workplace relatively. They, tend to pay higher, and they're usually really inclusive for like queer employees. Like I feel like probably the majority of my store is somewhere under the LGBTQ umbrella. So, it's like on the surface level, it seems like a decent place to work. And so when we first started talking about unionizing, a lot of people, not coworkers, but more in the community, were like, oh, but it's Starbucks. Like, I thought you guys were treated well. Like, you're just, making coffee. And it's kind of like Nosley said, like, we're just all workers, like, it doesn't matter what we're doing. I mean, we're still working. And in my head, even if Starbucks was, did live up to those standards, we could still use a union for accountability. I mean, that's, how it works in my head. But I don't know. So it's been, just every day I feel like I'm inspired by something one of my coworkers does, or something, some big win for Starbucks. Like I know yesterday there were 7 or 8 ballot counts across the country, and all of them won in a huge landslide. So, just seeing that every day is super inspiring. And then, yeah, like they both said, just talking to my coworkers every day and learning about, seeing what they're going through. Of course, we're close, like we're a pretty small staff. We all work pretty well together. We all know what each other go through more or less, at work. But then kind of getting deeper with it and knowing like, okay, this is how this work life affects you outside of Starbucks, like at your home and your family. And just kind of strengthening the little community we all have with each other, and being like, okay, like this is why we're doing this fight, like we're fighting for each other and with each other. And the other thing I think that really caught us all by surprise was how big it felt. Like, within the first couple weeks we filed, we had people from, like the mayor came, Nina Turner came, Sherrod Brown came. Like we just had all of these like big people walking into our little Starbucks and like, telling us, oh, like we're so proud of you. This is so great. Like you guys are gonna do so good. And we're just like, we're just a bunch of kids at a coffee shop, like, I don't know. It just felt very big, I guess, very important. Which it is, of course, like now making all those connections and seeing all of this happening in all kinds of industries all over the country and the world. It's like, wow, we really are part of like this huge thing, which I think also helped a lot of my coworkers kind of, I don't know, like recommit themselves in some ways, get past the anxiety of like, oh, this is like kind of scary. Like, what are they gonna do to us? Like, what are they gonna say? But having that much bigger support behind us, they were like, oh, okay, it doesn't matter, never mind. Like this is this is what we need to be doing. So yeah, it's been amazing.
Thank you. So interesting to see, people from different industries all sort of coming back to this idea of just learning a lot from just connecting with people at work, right? So kind of shows you how solidarity can be developed in any setting. Right?
Kind of related to that, can I ask Jennifer a follow-up? Kind of to Maddie's point about the mayor coming in and thanking the Starbucks workers. What did it feel like in Bessemer to have like the country watching? I felt like glued to my screen, waiting for updates out of that.
It was amazing. We had the Democratic Party to come down, Danny Glover. We had all the support. We had Biden to even speak out, and it was an emotional moment, but it was an awesome moment to know that we had that much support. And then to hear from international people standing up. And we understood then, this is not just a little small town Bessemer fight, but it's a fight that's all across the country. They weren't just rooting for us, but now they're rooting for themselves. Now we can stand up and we can do this. So people were asked, how do you feel that, all of this, we were just shocked. Like, we just want to unionize our little small building, but it became a momentum around the country of the things that people really felt, who had an opportunity to come out and stand and say, you know what, we've been feeling the same way. We've been disvalued, and now it's our time to stand up and take back our power.
Thank you. So throughout the pandemic, we have seen workers taking extraordinary risks at Amazon and other places to defend their rights in the workplace or to demand fair pay and better working conditions. And others have just decided to, stop working. Others have quit their jobs altogether. So I wanted to ask each of you, was there a moment that made you want to take the risk of trying to organize at your workplace? Do you remember any kind of turning point or some kind of experience that just sort of lit a spark?
Yes, I'll start with that one. After seeing a lot of employees being fired and disrespected by human resource, writing people up. And the thing that really sparked my decision was when I began to hear the chatter from other people who were having issues. And when I went out the security checkpoint one day and the lights went off on me. And they told me to step to the right to scan my badge and go into the other room. And so once I went in the other room, I had to take off my ambassador vest, shoes, empty all of my pockets. They want to do a security check to make sure you didn't steal anything. So once I got my stuff back, I asked them, would that time be added back to my break? Because mind you, this was at break time. And when I was told that I didn't get that time back for my break, that I can only use the remainder of my break, I knew then that it was time to unionize, because it was an abuse of power. And we were already going through a lot in the facility. It was hot, one person unloading the truck. It was so much going on. And that was my turning point right there. When I've seen people go in there and get flagged by the lights, but I didn't know what happens once you get back there or the process. But when I was told that you don't get your break back, then I knew that that was the time that it's time to unionize.
Yeah, they say, the best time to unionize your workplace is when things are going well. Unfortunately, no one ever actually does that. At the times I know our campaign started, our campaign didn't start. A couple folks who were on the OC with me started having these conversations. It was actually, it's kind of funny. One was around the Times had just published this horrifically homophobic op-ed, which they just do every once in a while. It's awful. And folks at the company were like, oh, like, this makes me feel unwelcome and unsafe as a queer member of the staff here. I wonder if there's anything we could ever do about that. And kind of simultaneously, there was another issue where there'd been a number of people who'd been advocating for gender neutral restrooms throughout our building, and it was taking a long time to make any kind of headway on that. And it kind of is very similar to Jennifer's story. It was just like, oh, like things, this isn't right. Things could be better, but there's nothing I can do to make this happen. But of course, there is something to do. It's to very slowly talk to all of your colleagues over a period of years and to form a union. So yeah, I think, and I think the Great Resignation kind of has spurred this in other industries too, of just an awareness that this isn't right, and this is the thing that we can do about it. At my part of what brought me to organizing, at my last job, I worked at Vox Media, another media company in New York, and the kind of something that went poorly there was that the company very abruptly, with no transition period, moved us to being paid in arrears instead of on every payday. And long story, but there was like a 2-week period when no one got paid when they should have been, and like everyone is freaking out because obviously more people than you would ever think are living paycheck to paycheck in all industries, because money is hard and living, like the cost of living is only going up. And so in our kind of like company Slack, people are asking questions and they're scared and they're confused. And someone typed, wouldn't it be cool if we had a union and we could do something about this? And like, I think me and that guy and like one other person had coffee like within the week, and we're like, actually, and that was kind of the origin story of that company unionizing. So unfortunately, it's usually something awful, which I feel like is part of what this organizing surge is coming in reaction to. But I guess as difficult as things are, I hope that we are going to make some kind of lemonade out of these shitty lemons.
Lemonade out of shitty lemons. That's a slogan we can all get behind.
Yeah, we need that on a hat.
You drink at Starbucks, lemonade out of shitty lemons.
Yeah.
Organized labor is often stereotyped as being largely comprised of men, often white men who'd work typical quote unquote blue collar jobs, despite the fact that women and people of color make up a sizable majority of union workers today. But the latest surge in labor organizing has actually put women at the helm of a lot of this workplace activism. So why do you think that is? And can you point to any personal experiences you've had while organizing and maybe talking to other women workers? I know Jennifer was talking about this earlier. Experiences that really capture how labor and gender intersect at this moment in the labor movement.
This is, I don't, if you guys don't care, I'll start. Yeah, that's a good point. I think we were talking about that a lot when we first started, because, you know, a lot of my coworkers like didn't really know anything about unionizing, me included. There was a big learning curve for a lot of us. And they were, you know, a lot of people brought up like, you know, that's like, you know, what our grandparents did, like steel workers and auto workers and stuff, you know, like, what does that have to do with Starbucks? And I think, I mean, maybe this is bringing it to big scale, but I think that the labor movement is just inherently tied to everything else within intersectionality, right? Like women's rights and queer liberation and, you know, putting power back into like our Black coworkers and our coworkers of color and all of these different things. It's, you know, it's a very real, tangible struggle. And I think the labor movement has been a very tangible way for people to kind of take control back over one of those things. I think, you know, as a queer woman, seeing recent news and, you know, not so recent news, just, I mean, we've always struggled more. I mean, we all know. And I think, and I mean, growing up with a single mom and two sisters, it was just the four of us. We had to be, we were raised to be outspoken and assertive, and that wasn't a bad thing. And I think that a lot of, especially younger women now, like women in the younger generation, are just kind of saying like, screw it. Like I'm tired of being quiet. I'm tired of just sitting and letting older white men run my life. And I think it's, like I said, I think just taking like power in the workplace back is a very like concrete way that we can feel like, okay, like we're doing something, we're making our lives better, we're making our coworkers' lives better. We can control some of the shitty lemons that are being thrown at us. Like this is a very, I don't know, it just feels very real in some ways, where a lot of things seem more abstract. Like, well, maybe we can't fix, the whole patriarchy thing right now, but we can start a union and maybe it'll be something,
Small steps. Maddie, I'm sorry, I think I skipped you for the last question. Liam just pointed that out. So do you have a story about, like a spark moment that happened with you, just to extend the shitty lemons metaphor a little bit?
Honestly, it was the Starbucks in Buffalo winning. I mean, we'd all been, as I said, I only started in August, and I think they won probably November-ish, like late 2021. So I hadn't been there super long, but I knew that, it's not the best work environment. There's a lot of like, just issues. And to see them win in Buffalo, led by Casey Moore, who is amazing and we love her, to see that success happen, some of my coworkers and I were like running to the back of house, like, okay, we should do it too. Like, because we'd heard whispers that other stores were thinking about it. And honestly, it was just kind of like, they can't stop us all at once. Like, maybe they might win some places, but the more people we get and the more power we give to this movement, like the better chance we have at winning. So yeah, big shout out to Casey for starting all of this. She's the best. Yeah, and it's just been winning ever since, I guess. So
Cool. Yeah, and now we can to go back to our question about sort of women's experiences organizing. Jennifer, did you want to talk a little bit more about what you had mentioned earlier about speaking with other women at work and everything?
Oh, yes, I was going to talk about one of the issues we had with Amazon. One of their tactics were to tell the employees that unions only want to bring in seniority, and we don't think that anyone should come in has a better work ethic than someone who's been here, should have to wait to be promoted. And one of the things that I noticed since I've been there, that the reason why they don't want to unionize to bring in seniority or recognize the employees in the facility is because out of 2 years, I've seen a bulk of men come in and put into leadership. And we're the ones who's training them for a job that they say we're not qualified for. And there are men after men, and they're bringing them in from the outside instead of promoting from the inside. So that's another huge issue. And one of the things, back to what Maddie was saying earlier about how they were saying that some places will get an increase. That's one of the things that the anti-union people spoke in one of our meetings, that that some, if there is ever a raise in the company, that some Amazons will get a $50 increase, and we won't get it because we're unionizing.
It's so disappointing. Yeah, I think for better or worse, almost in any industry that I'm aware of, women and people of color and really people of any minority are promoted at a slower rate. And one thing that I really loved about the process of organizing and of getting to know my coworkers on the organizing committee at general meetings, just in general, was getting to create our own kind of uh, like, I don't want to say power structure, but web of relationships. I had so much to learn from, everyone on the organizing committee, but particularly I can think of several women whose like the example they said I kind of like still think about when I go into difficult conversations or like thinking about how I want to change something. Our unit council unit chair is a woman named Kathy Jong, who's just like absolutely incredible, has been there from day one. The kind of like kind of simultaneous fire and patience that she brings to kind of difficult situations, I like just admire completely. Vicky Crossan is our unit secretary, and she does have a library science degree, but the like organization and kind of like can do itiveness that she brings to our union proceedings is just like really cool to see. Shay Culpepper is another. This is the last one, I promise. As a data engineer at the Times, who the way that she kind of like sliced and diced our spreadsheets of our colleagues as we were trying to talk to them was just so amazing. And like all of these are women who I would have had no reason to work with in my day-to-day job, but now like not only do I know them and am friends with them and have benefited from their examples, I also know that if any of them ever have trouble getting promoted at work, I will know firsthand that it is absolute bullshit. And also, hopefully we'll be able to like be part of doing something about that. So there's so much that I have benefited from the example of other women, and that it's like made my job more like kind of rich through the process of organizing. And it's the ability to like have those relationships so that we can also lift each other up at work when facing those kind of like, again, kind of like disappointing but not surprising examples of systemic discrimination. That's part of what's so great about it.
Yeah, thank you. So our last question, official question is, with the union victories that we've seen in recent months, we have seen workers deploy some innovative and often unconventional strategies when organizing in industries or workplaces that unions haven't really been able to penetrate very much in the past. So can you tell us about any approaches or tactics that you've developed or applied while organizing that felt creative to you or experimental?
I can take this really fast. I think that the internet has really changed what organizing looks like. It's just so much easier to be in contact with people. You don't have to have their home phone number. Just like the ability to use a smartphone and to like kind of meet people where they are. Maybe that's like social media. Maybe that's like, I don't know, WhatsApp, like whatever it is. I think that's really changed the game. But I also think like the kind of flip side of that is that it can be really tempting to find kind of like digital kind of like shows of virality as like as progress, but like the only real progress is the union being recognized and actually making the contract. So it's kind of this double-edged thing where the attention is really wonderful, but the attention on its own is not going to change things. So I've just found that so fascinating to kind of like take note of while organizing at a digital shop, but also just like in a world where the internet is much bigger than it used to be.
Yeah, definitely. As a member of the media, also like you can sort of, it's sometimes difficult to cut through like a lot of the glitter on social media. So it's good to, and I think unionization itself is one of these analog processes that can only really be done. It sort of reminds us, right? It's important to connect with people. But yeah, others?
Yes, one of the things that we did as far as being creative is we took up space on the inside. The second go round, instead of taking my break and going to the car, sitting down, I would stay in the break room, and we would host meetings there during our lunch break. And we had an opportunity to talk to employees who were coming in and out, and some who were on the fence that was holding their ballots. that was one of the most creative things that we thought of, like at the last minute. And people walked away from the table and said, we're going home to vote. I had discussions with people that had a vote no shirt on that changed their mind after having a conversation with us. So suspending my lunch break, and we put on panels inside the break room during lunch hour helped, and it was very creative for us. And also not going straight home after working our shift, we stayed outside to answer questions because most of us were on the day shift. As night shift was coming in, they were able to ask questions and tell us some of the things that were going on night shift that we needed to know to kind of help get the news and education out to the night shift workers who had concerns as well. So taking up time after work, not going straight home, and creating space on the inside during our breaks, our lunch breaks, helped a whole lot.
I love that. I think we'll probably we could make some use of that. One of the things that we did, I mean, like I said, Casey Moore in Buffalo, just their their whole movement has helped us a lot in organizing our folks and people in our community. They've given us a lot of like materials and inspiration and a lot of training sessions and stuff. And one of the things that we got from that was we got like this big Airbnb through Workers United, like they helped us pay for it and stuff. And people from Pittsburgh, who are also organizing, Starbucks Workers United, came, and then a bunch of Cleveland folks came, and we just like kind of knocked out a bunch of stores in Cleveland and surrounding areas. So we just kind of canvassed basically, and we printed little business cards with our info, email address and stuff. So we handed those out. And then they went back. I wasn't actually able to be there, but I was FaceTimed in and I was getting texted and stuff. They went back to the Airbnb and they just like had a cookout, and people from the other stores that they ended up talking to throughout the day came over, and it seemed like it was a really, really good like networking opportunity for people, even if those stores don't end up unionizing ever or for a long time. Like they at least have our info. They met people in person and we're like, hey, like we're willing and ready to help you however we can. And I thought that was really good, and everyone that went said it went really well and they had a really good time, kind of getting off of online for once in 2.5 years, being able to meet people face to face and just kind of have those conversations. So yeah, I think that was a really good experience.
I feel like the common thread of all of these answers is like unionizing your workplace. It takes time. It takes your break. It takes your evening hours. But it is so worth it. I think like it's a worthwhile investment. But yeah, I think it can be tempting to say that I think like, women kind of take up a lot of this kind of nurturing work or development work. Hopefully, like part of why, we're all here is that we're bringing other people in to share this work with us. But it's work, and it's hard, and it takes up time. And I think it's like absolutely worth it. But it like effectively, yeah, there were points of the past year or so, and like it was my hobby. It was like the primary thing that I did in my free time. And I look forward to it being less the primary thing that I do in my free time for a little while, but worth it again.
Yeah, it can be like a second job, but a job that is actually enjoyable. So before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to ask if any of you have questions for each other about your experiences or, best practices and that sort of thing.
I'll throw something out. I feel like this gets brought up a lot, but I know, Nasli, you were just saying it takes up a lot of time. What are your best ways that you have found to like take a step back or like be able to still take care of like yourself and your people outside of the logistics, I guess.
Yeah, I think I really but like had a privilege of being of such a large unit that we had lots of people kind of like step back from the OC and bring new people on. And like it now that we're organized, like I'm not going to be on the bargaining committee, at least not in the kind of like immediate future. And I like feel horrifically guilty about it. But also like I'm tired. And I was just talking yesterday I had my like kind of first one-on-one with my new shop steward, and he was on the organizing committee. He like for maybe a year, but like left it about a year ago, and he's like zippy and refreshed and ready to go and ready to have these conversations. And it was kind of like, okay, we're tagging off each other off. Like it's time for you to step back in. It's time for me to step out and like take a break for a little while. So it's easier with the larger unit, but yeah, just like no union is, if a union depends on one person to be good, that's a bad union. The point is that it's something that we all do together. But I'm curious actually to hear Jennifer answer the same question, particularly as you go into a second election and just like that must be exhausting.
Oh, yeah. For 2 years, and there have been plenty of times, that I've said I'm tired. I am so tired. I have to take a step back. Sometimes we have to go into doubling up on the events. Sometimes some of our core group can't participate. And one of the things that we would do is we have people, what we call, if they're not a one, they're two, they're supporters. They may not want to be a leader, but they are strong supporters. So one of the things I would suggest is when we can't come or some of our other core group can't be at some of our actions, we will take a couple of people that we're close to in the facility who helps out on the floor, say, hey, we'll pick up the phone call. We're giving out t-shirts and flyers in the morning. We really need to bring in a couple of people to help. Yes, I can come in and work a little early. And even though they don't come to all of the other actions, we pull in some of the people who are not so afraid to come and just participate so that other people can take care of family or just go home for the evening and get some rest. So that was, one of the things we did as well. But it's tiring. I mean, yeah. I've been saying, I'm tired, but I got to keep going. I take me a break, but sometimes I say, well, I do morning shift. I'm not going to stay in the evening, and I end up staying in the evening anyway.
Yeah, I feel like that's hard. And I know like myself and my coworkers have noticed that too, like, feeling kind of a reignited passion for like the work that we're doing. It's hard to step away sometimes. But I know that we, maybe not so much now that, we're starting to get our ballots and voting soon and stuff, but leading up to this, we've been working a lot as a city. So we have a group chat with, people from my store and then the other few stores in our district that have filed, and we kind of do a lot of the work as that unit too. And I think that helps. Just being able to like you both were saying, like, okay, I'm tired, you have the energy, you do it. And just like, let me know how it goes. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Great. So I think we can move into the Q&A. We have 6 questions, so I think I'll just try to curate them a little bit. We have a couple of questions about Starbucks organizing in particular. So maybe I'll knock those out of the way. So the first is from Dale Fink. Did the Starbucks organizers take the risk to enter other Starbucks shops to personally introduce themselves, or just rely on word of mouth for others to know about their organizing drive? So I guess it's about, how public were you, right, about your role as organizers. And the second one is from Desritas Gilkes Boucher, I think. What reassurance were you able to give your colleagues when they were told, threatened by management? I think this might apply to other companies too, but I think this is about the Howard Schultz like passive aggressive salary raise offer. What reassurance were you able to give your colleagues when they were told / threatened by management to be deprived of salary increase and other benefits if they are union members?
Yeah, good questions. For the first one, about going into shops and stuff, I don't know if that was specifically relevant to when the Pittsburgh people came, or if that's just in general. But either way, we have done both. I know there's been especially early on, there was a lot of like Twitter DMing, and like connecting to each other that way. But we've also, gone into other stores and let them, see our faces and stuff. I think kind of my common answer to both of these questions is that I've been very like pleasantly surprised and inspired by my coworkers, not giving a shit, like in terms of being careful. I think at first we were, especially because my store specifically filed so early. But as the months have gone on and more stores have won their vote and more stores have filed, we're just like, like there is always the chance that we'll be retaliated against personally, like maybe they'll fire me, or maybe maybe I'll be pulled into some meeting with my district manager or something. But I think for a lot of us kind of on the front lines, there's also that knowledge kind of in the back of our heads that like we're not the only one anymore, and that's happening nationwide, and there's attention on it. And I know like for us specifically, our Workers United rep, his name is Pete. He's been amazing, and he's always just super responsive and super willing to hop on a call or a phone call, Zoom call, whatever. If there's something like kind of sketchy going on, or if there's something that we want to do that we're worried about, he's always there to give advice and guidance about like legally what the company can and can't do. So we know to kind of keep an eye out for that kind of thing. And I think that kind of goes into the next question too, about like what we've been telling people about, Howard Schultz's promises and stuff. He did say in that memo yesterday that like these benefits specifically won't go to any stores that have unionized or in the process. And I think when some of my coworkers saw that, they were like, what, how can he do that? And we were like, yeah, well, he kind of can't. So like, maybe it's not super comforting, but rest assured in the knowledge that like, he's walking a very fine line between what's legal and what's not. So like, I think that's weirdly reassuring in some ways that like, while we're also being risky and kind of pushing the line, like so are they in their retaliations. And I think it's helped a lot of us to just kind of be like, well, if you're not really gonna care too much about what's legal and what's not, then maybe we won't either, and we'll just kind of see what happens. So it's been kind of reckless, but I think it's worked in our favor. And I don't know, it makes it, I think, more exciting in some ways than, I don't know. So yeah.
You still got the moral high ground, even if both of y'all are playing dirty. So, okay. And our next question is, this is from Ellen Cassidy. Do you feel you are quote unquote natural leaders, or have you discovered your leadership abilities in the process of your union work, or both? Are there aspects of leadership that have traditionally not gotten enough visibility that are evident in what you're doing?
I think mine is a little of both. I worked in ministry before, youth leader, praise and worship leader. And I just discovered this side of fighting for workers' rights, and I love it. I've been fighting for people for a long time, but I really just discovered this part of who I am.
I love that answer from Jennifer. I think it highlights how it can be so tempting, particularly in the workplace, to think that like you're only a natural leader if you are promoted by your boss to be a leader in the workplace. That there are obviously so many ways to be a leader in your community, in your church, and like even in your friend group. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been really cool to like, so much of unionizing is coming into our power. But even individually, to kind of like come into your power to talk to the people around you and mobilize them and inspire them, and also run into like really thorny things that just deal from the fact that people are people and have to figure out what it means to be a good leader in that situation. Yeah, I've learned a million things. Again, like I said at the beginning, about human nature and relationships and relationship building and relationship repairing from unionizing, that I hope has made me a better leader. But it's so hard and so weird and like so fun to talk about and think about.
I love this question. And I love talking about it because I would have never seen myself in this position. You know, if you told me like back in August, when I was hired into the company, I started as a barista. And then about a month and a half later, which was kind of too early, but you know, it worked out. I was promoted to a shift supervisor, which is a position I've been in, you know, since then. And I was told, you know, we have a pretty good like supervisor team. There's a few of us, and we're all pretty tight knit. And, you know, like some of my best work friends are also supervisors, who I've been able to lean on significantly as I was figuring out like my role as a leader, as a supervisor, just to be like, hey, like, I don't really know what I'm doing, because I've never really had a job where I was in a kind of leadership or authority role. And then, you know, not to be too topical, but just as like a young woman in that kind of role in a workplace, I was really overwhelmed at first. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know, you know, how to lead, I guess, in a way that feels effective. And there were a couple phone calls or angry customers. And I remember this one in particular, they called and they were mad about something and they asked for the supervisor in charge. And I said it was me. And then they laughed at me. So that was a very fun day. And it was, you know, I feel like I think about that a lot now as like kind of the leader of this union effort. And I'm like, well, shows them, you know. But yeah, I would never have seen myself in this position as a leader in this capacity. But it's just been a lot of learning boundaries, learning limits. And I have learned to embrace the phrase, I don't know, because most of the time people don't care. Like, I mean, that seems obvious, but like people don't care that you don't have all the answers. It's like I was saying earlier about leaning on even people at other stores, like, you know, unionizing their own stores around us, to figure something out, or if they have more experience, you know, just being able to build that web of relationships, like Nasli said earlier, just really, you know, you got to find a little community. And I think that's where a lot of my leadership strength comes from, is the people I have around me.
So our next question is somewhat related. Could you speak, it's from Zephyr. Could you speak to building solidarity across racial / class / political divides? Have conflict resolution techniques been helpful, or can they be helpful? I'm asking because I'm planning a breakout session on the topic of solidarity within unions and unionizing for the upcoming national gathering of the Alternatives to Violence Project in DC.
We actually we're figuring out the kind of structure of our unit council right now, and we have 2 grievance chairs, because in the course of, like, I don't know, any web of relationships, there are going to be feelings that are hurt, there are going to be disagreements that come up, and you know, it's not really worth trusting human resources. Human resources at a company does not exist to protect workers. It exists to protect the interests of the company. So yeah, we've been putting a lot of thought and research, and by we, I mean people who are not me, to be honest. I'm just like watching in admiration while this gets set up, while we build out the structures that we're going to use during the bargaining process and beyond, for what happens if 2 members of the union have a disagreement, or you know, in the same way that a shop steward is entitled to accompany you to any meeting with the company in which you might be facing disciplinary action. we want to be able to help each other in cases of disagreement with each other too. So it's really hard, and it hurt. It sucks so bad when your feelings are hurt. But we want to build structures where we can like kind of come to something, have some kind of structure in place to go through, and like remember, of course, always that we're all workers here, and that the real kind of the real issues come from the management having power over us. So I don't know. Yeah, it's something that we think about very consciously, but it's so hard.
Maddie or Jennifer?
Yes, one of the things we do right now we have a multiple group. And I think when you begin to build the group in the beginning, then when we move on, then we could be, we're structuring now. So once we move on and go to, I think there should be, meetings and collaborations with everyone. And the biggest issue we've had was not employees, Black and brown employees, or, all colors working together. It's the company who tried to divide us, even through the very end of our campaign. And I think that's one of their tactics in trying to win or keeping the unions out, is to try different types of divide. But one thing about it, you have to continue to come together and structure with each other and collaborate with each other, and not just in the beginning, but carry it on through.
Yeah, I think we keep coming back to the same thread of just being real with each other, right? Like just embracing, I don't know, we're all human, like we're all people. I know there's a lot of systemic things that get in the way of that sometimes, and it's really, really hard to work through. I don't have a great answer to this question. I think partly just because I'm in kind of a unique situation where I feel like Starbucks attracts generally a certain demographic of people who are all like younger and more progressive. Just it wasn't really much of an issue. We were all kind of on the same page. I know there was one of my coworkers, she's older, and she has she and her husband have a company, like a roofing company together, and she worked for Starbucks a long time ago, and then came back for mostly like health insurance benefits and stuff to kind of supplement. I know she kind of has a big family, so supplementing that. And at first she was like not super on board. She wasn't like mean or hostile about it. She was just like, not really for me. But then back in February, when Starbucks started cutting everyone's hours nationwide, she was like, okay, wait, this is affecting me and my ability to get benefits, and I'm seeing how it's affecting all of you. And it's just like, I don't know, it really kind of threw off the vibe in the store, and she could tell that. And she texted me one day and she was like, okay, like, explain it to me. Like, what are your thoughts? What are you hoping to get out of this? Like, what's involved? And it was a really good conversation. I think just approaching, if there's people that are like on the fence or leaning no, I think approaching everything with assuming positive intent from all sides. Like, she didn't have anything against the union, but then when that stuff started happening, she was like, okay, wait, now I'm behind and I want to get caught up. So we talked for a while, and she's been super supportive ever since. So I think just assuming the best in people, which can also be very hard and exhausting in some ways. But I don't know, that's what we keep coming back to. So
Sometimes just works to wait for the boss to do something to like piss everyone off to the maximum degree. That helps build solidarity. Our last couple of questions. One is from Kay Claire. For 70 years, US businesses have perfected terroristic union busting techniques, such as captive audience meetings, supervisory one-on-one meetings, threats/promises by consultants, etc., that are often very successful in getting people to vote no. What techniques has this new surge of unionization learned to counteract these management tactics? Yeah, I'm sure Jennifer has a lot to say about it. Well, all of you have had experiences with various anti-union consultants. So yeah.
Yes, with the anti-union consultants really kind of angered me to the point where I almost just backed up because it was overpowering. And I often question why, even after, the last election, why is the company allowed to interfere with our unionization? And after we've educated, we say, okay, we're educating people, we're giving them the facts, go online, fact check yourself. And you have consultants come in who's only there for those 3 months. And one of the employees asked, why we only see y'all during election time? You're hired to come in, manipulate, then fear tactics and confusion to the employees that we've just educated. So they have to come back and they ask us questions. And even after in the class, like in the beginning, we were allowed to interject and ask questions. And then they stopped it for 2 weeks and they brought us back like after a month and they made everybody be quiet. It was almost like a muzzle until this presentation is over. So at that point, okay, your tactic is to go through this whole presentation to only answer 1 or 2 questions. Because in the beginning, we would stand up and we were interject and we were correct the lies they were telling. So after those 2 weeks, they knew that the second time around, most of the people were educated. We did a lot of education. So their tactic was to muzzle during the class. So there were less questions answered and less answers to come out. We did our best to interrupt those classes to bring out the truth. And then once we went to the floor, they will come out on the floor and pull employees individually. When we would normally get written up for time off task, they would stand there for at least 30 to 45 minutes for each employee not doing their work, just to tell them, don't go with this union, research on this union. There are a lot of unions, but not this one, so it was really a hard fight. I just got angry because it was like, I'm just beating the air, but we continued. They will come back and ask questions where the union consultant, anti-union guy said this, and it was, they're trained to press fear, and they would send the messages to make it seem like our campaigning outside, we were harassing people, to give a bad reputation to the organizers, until I heard an anti-union person spoke up and said, no, because we were out there. She said, you can talk about, this, that, and the other, but I'm going to stand up because I didn't see that happen, And she said, she said, when the message came to my phone, I knew it was a lie because we were out there. You all weren't harassing anybody. So the company sends out these mass messages. Oh, I know the organizers did this to you, and they did this, and you came and told us, so you don't have to deal with them, stuff like that. It was really tough. And I think that part should not be allowed to even interfere with our efforts to organize and give the proper information. And they use a tactic to play on the intelligence of workers to put in fear. We just have to keep educating.
Yeah, I would say that like that kind of to like Jennifer's point, there are no new tactics, but like what we do have is even greater income inequality, companies with even more money to pour into even more resources, where it's all the same old, really, like, irritating to harmful tactics, but like it being able to do it at a particular scale that like has changed more. And of course, as I think Jennifer highlighted, all you can do is fall back on the relationships that you have and talking to people even more and answering their questions. I think it's very funny that an anti-union person was like, no, that's not right. I was there. Like what a funny place to find an ally. And at the times I know we found allies in funny places from people who were like, oh, like I like what I want to do is like have this vote and like do my job and like help get this journalism in the world. Why does management like keep talking about this? Like the fact that they won't let this go, the fact that they're being so overwhelming about this, like created some new allies for us in a kind of funny way.
Maddie, did you have any thoughts on braving anti-union?
I won't talk too much because I know we're short on time, but my biggest thing is just like, I put this in the chat too, but it sounds kind of petty, but just like knowing that we have the moral high ground over, you know, company people whose job it is to lie to us and retaliate against us, goes a long way. Like it feels very good to be like, okay, we are actually on the ground doing this job in the day-to-day, like facing customers, facing each other, you know, dealing with whatever. And you're going to come in once in a span of 5 months to tell us that everything we're doing is wrong and bad and we're, you know, we don't know what we're doing. I mean, it's not really a tactic, I guess, but then just to talk to each other and be like, well, that was really stupid. And they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, it does go a long way, I think, in keeping morale up, just knowing that like we're doing the right thing. And I feel like Starbucks in particular is very cushiony in its language. So they try to frame all their anti-union stuff very pro-partner, which really just works against them in the end, I think, because we know what's pro-partner and what's not. And like it's, I don't know, it's pretty they're not very subtle about it. So it's easy for us to be like, yeah, we can just, you know, we can just basically ignore that. We can disregard that.
All right, I think we are at time. So I'd like to thank again all of our wonderful panelists for such an inspiring and insightful conversation. And of course, to our audience members for such a great set of questions. And yes, thank you to the Century Foundation. And by the way, I plan to take a clip of this for my podcast, Belabored, so you'll be able to get a truncated audio version of this conversation the next episode. It's at Dissent Magazine. And yeah, and it will also be on YouTube and Facebook Live. Thank you again to everyone. And yeah, we will see you later. Well, solidarity, I guess.
Yeah, solidarity forever. Thank you all so much. And thanks again to the Century Foundation and Will Empower and Mark Zuckerman, the president of Will Empower. And again, we have a recording of this that we'll send out to all the emails that were registered. And again, it was live streamed on Facebook on KI's page and the Century Foundation. Thank you so much, Michelle, Nazli, Maddie, and Jennifer. This was really, really fantastic. And solidarity forever, as you said, Michelle.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Good to meet you.